if we could start with a bit of personal history. Provide us with some of your family background, including where you're from and what led you into the legal profession.
I grew up in Westport, Connecticut, which is about an hour from New York City on the coast, with my mother, father, and younger brother. Thought in high school I was going to teach high school, I was going to be an oceanographer, I was going to represent our country in the Foreign Service, and then decided, well, I'll just go to college and then figure things out. I wasn't so committed. Went to Kenyon College in Ohio. Wasn't quite sure what I was going to do with the rest of my life. Thought I might become a librarian because I love to read. And I got a job offer at a graduation party, great timing, for a special project in the American Library Association. I went off to Boston to do that for a year and came back just before my birthday to visit some friends at Kenyon, where my younger brother was also a student. And he said he would pay for my law school admission test because he wanted to be a lawyer and he was going to use me as his tester. And so I took the test and I thought, there might be something to it. And so I decided to apply to law school as well as library science school, and knew that I wanted to experience living in the South. So I applied primarily to Southern law schools and ended up coming to Vanderbilt and staying in Middle Tennessee.
Now, I want to back up just a little bit because it's my understanding that you studied and received an undergraduate degree in world religions or
Yes,
religion?
in religion at Kenyon College, which is historically an Episcopal related school, but it was not denominational studies. I had the fortune of going to Kenyon the year they admitted women in the fall of 1969. They'd been an all-male college since 1824. And so I became one of 3 women in the sophomore class, and majored in religion, and found that studying texts very closely academically was good preparation for studying statutes very closely as a lawyer.
Now, what was it about your family background or your childhood, teen years that led you into religious studies?
The absence of religion in my family life growing up primarily. I went my first year to Ohio Wesleyan, which had a Methodist background and required you to take a religion course to graduate. So I took one in my first year and found it of interest. They were on a trimester, and so I actually took an advanced course in my third trimester and thought that that would be a nice alternative to history, which I had planned on being my major.
How important do you see your experience and education at Vanderbilt to your legal profession?
Oh, crucial. Vanderbilt was then and is even more now a quality institution with diverse faculty and fields of study. I have took a position in my second year clerking for one of the adjunct professors, and that firm gave me my first job in the practice of law. I've had the honor of serving on the law school's board twice, and so I'm very proud to be a Vanderbilt graduate. We were part of the class where women really were more than double the prior year's class, and I remain close friends with many of my colleagues in that class.
Now, you've already alluded to it. You began studying the legal profession and then beginning legal practice at a time when women were making inroads into the profession. What was that really like?
Well, looking back on it, it strikes me as bizarre that I decided to go to law school without having met a woman lawyer, but that was the case. When I was in law school, there were more women in law school than there were women practicing as attorneys in this country. So it was the middle 70s was really a tipping point for it. There were not very many women going to court at the time I got out, and that led to some difficulties and awkwardness. I had started the year after I graduated a breakfast for new admittees and invited the Tennessee Supreme Court to come. And I did that with a few folks helping for several years, and that was the precursor and led to the formation of the Lawyers Association for Women, which is an organization for, but not limited to, women in the Nashville and Middle Tennessee area. We were concerned with trying to get women an equal opportunity to become partners in law firms, to sit on the bench, to be treated equally under the state's statutes. And I think being involved in organizational efforts has made a difference in improving the quality of justice statewide. And so I'm pleased to have been a part of that.
You were obviously a pioneer in the legal world as a woman, and I wonder what was it about your background or experience that gave you the confidence or the determination to do that?
I think having been the only woman in a classroom at Kenyon was very important to me, to have the confidence to be the only woman in a courtroom when I got to Tennessee. Having been, as I say, one of the few women in my class, I was the only woman in all of my academic classes but one that first year. That was not easy. I hadn't been exposed to overt gender bias until that experience, and there were a lot of faculty and students who had not been happy with the idea that women were going to be admitted to the school, and so that gave me some good practice, and I think the relative success that I had in school and the camaraderie with other women who were going through the same experience as newly admitted lawyers was helpful.
Now, I think you spent just a short time at your first job at Stokes and Bartholomew after your legal profession.
Well, actually, it was a fairly long period of time as lawyers go. The firm I was, at the time I joined it, a small boutique firm I became the fourth lawyer, but it merged with another firm and grew and changed and shifted. And I stayed with that firm until I came to Murphysboro. I took a semi-sabbatical. I kept my shares in the firm. I was already a partner, and went and was general counsel for an entity I had helped create in the legislature, working with the Tennessee Municipal League. And so I did that in-house with them for a bit more than 2 years, and then went back to the firm. And it was from the firm that I came and took Tom Reed's offer to become the assistant city attorney here in Murfreesboro.
And I don't understand the law well enough to probably ask this question, but it would seem that municipal law is a specialization, but yet at the same time you're dealing with so many issues that affect communities that yet you have to have a broad understanding. I'd like to hear what you have to say about that.
I think that's true. Generally, specialization is the way lawyers are practicing these days. The generalist, except in small communities, is less frequent, less common than it used to be. But a municipal lawyer has to be an expert in a great many fields. The core, for a city like Murfreesboro, you have contracts, you have employment law, you have sort of the business of governing, the ordinances, the resolutions, the financial restrictions on how you operate, how you borrow money. But for Murfreesboro, for example, we have an airport, so you need to know about aviation law. We have an electric utility. You need to know about that law, which isn't the same thing as knowing about water and sewer utility law, which isn't the same thing as knowing about cable television law, which isn't the same thing as knowing about school law, which isn't the same thing about knowing about land use, isn't the same thing about construction contracts for all the infrastructure that we've had to build. So there, I'm occasionally envious of lawyers who just do one thing and get to do it in great detail and go only to those kinds of education programs. But the diversity of it has made it challenging and interesting and fulfilling. Difficult, but all those good things too.
Thomas Reed was the former city attorney that you knew. How did that friendship or association begin?
We had actually been opposite each other in several cases. I won 2 electrocution cases against him and then stopped taking electrocution cases. I wasn't going to risk my record. And he brought me in on a complicated case that the city had involving the Governmental Tort Liability Act in federal court, because I had done a lot of work with the legislature in amending and interpreting that law. And so we had known each other in those different professional contexts.
And so he had seen you be successful against him. He ended up hiring you, right?
He did. He called me when he had a sudden vacancy in the assistant's position to see what my opinion was about someone we both knew, whether I thought she would be suitable. And I said, well, yes, but let me check with this other person and I'll get back to you. And as we're concluding the conversation, he said, well, you know, you're who I'd really like to hire, but I can't afford you, and laughed. And so I said, well, no one's ever offended by a job offer, and laughed, and went on to check on this other person. And then he called me back and said, you know, I really think we ought to get together. So we got together for lunch, talked about it, and then, the job offer resulted.
Now, over the years, what stands out in your memory during the time you were here, especially regarding legal issues and having to deal with, lawsuits and that kind of thing?
Oh gosh, it's impossible with 23 years to, sort of pick one thing out. I mean, we had a variety of legal issues in terms of, are we going to have an elected and appointed school board? Are we going to have 7th and 8th grade? What are we going to do about the Teamsters trying to unionize the police department? What are we going to do about controversies over the flag? What are we going to do about Occupy Murphysboro? What are we going to do about this adult video store? What are we going to do? I mean, there have been a lot of issues, not specifically legal things, as for almost any city employee who was here at the time. The experience we had in the Good Friday tornadoes stands out as a time of challenge and strength that was memorable. Being in the EOC and hearing the reports come in and knowing they were very close to where I lived, I had to wonder whether my house had gone and still keep functioning. Lots of other people working for the city had similar concerns or were directly in the path of the tornado and were impacted. But I was very, very proud of the city and our citizens who volunteered. It was a test that I think the city met.
Are there other accomplishments that you're proud of?
Well, I'd like to think of myself as quietly competent. I don't know that now's the time to brag. I think those will just have to speak for themselves over time.
Okay. You were involved in helping plan the Gateway, and I think you referred to that development. And I mean, it's growing. It seems successful. There's a lot of traffic and activity now, and more restaurants and other businesses popping up. Did the development turn out even better than you envisioned it to be?
Yes, I don't know that anyone could have anticipated all of the good things that came to pass. When the city, under Mr. Haley, Mr. Reed's leadership with the council support, acquired the land for the city-owned part of the Gateway, we had envisioned that that's where the conference center facility would be. As we know, that was ultimately built beyond that, closer to the interstate, but that made that whole corridor more viable. That getting the hospital to commit, getting Medical Center Parkway built, getting the covenants in place for the development on the city land, which led to the development of zoning standards for the whole corridor, is something that I think was the result of work of a lot of people. I'm just glad to have been part of it.
Growth and development is typically seen as a positive thing, but then it can get out of hand to where you have unintended consequences sometimes. And I wonder, the issue of property rights, it seems to be so sacred in American culture, in our society. And some people wonder, well, why did they do it that way? But a lot of times the law has to allow for that or support that notion of people who want to buy and develop property. I'd like to hear what you have to say about that.
Well, I think, property rights is indeed a constitutional right. I think we are still going to find out what the consequences are of the vested rights bill that the legislature passed that took effect in January, that says development once started is subject to the development standards that were in place when it began, even if the city 3 years later realizes it would be better to change a development standard, for example, to require sidewalks. Even if a subdivision was largely unbuilt, if it had started and met the standards in the law, you could not require sidewalks on the new unbuilt portions of the subdivision. If it decides it's in the overall interests of the city and its citizens to change a standard, it may or may not be able to make that standard applicable to a lot of development that is at that time still unbuilt.
That leads us to a fairly good segue. Do you have advice that you would like to leave for city leaders going forward with your experience that you've gained from this and the future city attorney as well?
The job of the attorney is to inform and advise and give legal opinions when asked for. I don't feel that it's really appropriate for me to give political advice. I think the balance that the city has struck between government interests and individual interests is a good one. It's certainly always been fiscally responsible. I have every reason to believe that will continue. It's put more emphasis on having citizen boards and commissions, and that's hard to do these days because people are so busy. They're less inclined to be involved in associations and organizations, I think, than they used to be. People are so used to doing things electronically. But trying to, as the city grows, involve new people in the boards, commissions, and other activities for community input, I think will be important to keep Murphysboro strong. I think we grew in part because of our geography and MTSU and activities of the chamber, but I think there's a lot of indistinct community values that contribute to growth, and I think Murfreesboro is as strong as it is because while respecting its traditions, it's added new people and it's listened to its citizens, and I think it should do that. I have every reason to believe it will.
What are your plans now that you're about ready to leave in, just a week or so? Do you have plans for the future?
I don't have specific career plans. I'm not intending to open up my shingle or a consulting business, though it's been very flattering the number of people who has assumed that must be what was next. I've told people I intend to find out who I am when I'm not working, because after having worked as a lawyer for 39 years, this is a brand new page. I have some, home to-do lists, and I have some family things I want to do. I have some places I want to travel to on my bucket list. I have some movies I want to see and books I want to read. I want to try and take more advantage of the Parks and Recreation Department offerings, but I have no master plan.
Okay. Well, I've only known you for a short time, about a year or so, and I have to say that despite how busy and complicated your life is with all these complex issues, you've always been very cordial and gracious. And
Thank you.
I appreciate that, and I'm sure that echoes what a lot of other people would say about your time here. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. It's been an honor.